and they look up, and Kong sort of emerges from the shadow. Oh no, wait. Scratch that. What winds up happening... Next time you see Kong is on the on an airport in Florida. There's a group of planes that are landing, and they are called off because Kong lands, and Kong's really not knowing what's going on. Kong is just... He's just kind of like there, and he's scared. Kong is scared, and the people running away scare him even more, and eventually they kind of anger him. And then what winds up happening is that this loud... I think something has to scare him. I haven't figured it out yet, but something scares him, and he runs back into the ocean, and he disappears for a while. Then the next time you see him, he's on the Appalachian trails, and a group of hikers spot him. They hear heavy breathing, and Kong sort of... He doesn't chase them off, he just kind of watches them as they run off, and they report it to the authorities, and they kind of laugh at them, but then one policeman overhears them, and it's like, wait, where did you see this? And they go, oh, he was on the Appalachian Mountains, and he realizes that they did have word out that there is a giant ape-like creature that has been let loose somewhere around here. And so he reports it to Washington. Washington reports it to the generals that are going after Godzilla. And then I'm not sure how Kong is viewed again. I think what winds up happening is that he winds up attacking a village for food, or something like that. And then what happens is they send a colonel to go over there and check it out. And he is giving little to no forces to fight King Kong, except for a few artillery pieces and machine guns, because of how much is needed to try to stop Godzilla. And so while this is happening in Australia, the creature that is on that island off the coast of Australia winds up destroying a fishing boat, and then you don't really see it again until it goes to England. And when it's in England, it destroys a research vessel, which sends the British Navy off searching for this new Godzilla-like creature. And then that Godzilla-like creature that I'm naming Minla lands on that nuclear reactor and destroys it, absorbing all the radiation it can get. Now, Minla isn't going to be like that shitty pile of turd from Son of Godzilla, or even Godzilla Final Wars, even Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. He's going to look an awful lot like Godzilla Jr. from Godzilla vs. Destroya, because I want him to look like I want him to actually look like Godzilla. I don't want him to look like a pile of shit. And he's a menace. And so what winds up happening is they have to split the United States has to split their forces even more to fight not only Godzilla, but also Minla. And so now that there's three monsters, there's King Kong, Minla, and Godzilla. And Godzilla winds up going in a loop, and Minla kind of follows Godzilla in that loop, but a little bit faster. And what winds up happening is off of Manhattan, Kong winds up fighting Minla and breaking its jaw, killing it. And then Godzilla arrives not long later, and they have Godzilla and King Kong has the epic fight, which I will not tell you how that ends up and how the ending is, because it's pretty awesome. I'm going to admit it's a pretty kick-ass ending. I'm just going to say right now that Godzilla is, I'm probably going to talk about this more in my actual Godzilla movie reviews, but Godzilla in this one is not just a metaphor for, nuclear radiation and nuclear annihilation, stuff like that. But in this one, Godzilla is more of a metaphor for death itself, because, I'm looking at the situation now in not just the United States, but all over the world, and how overly populated the world is. Something's going to happen and it's going to wipe us out. Or maybe not all of us, but something's going to happen and it's going to kill quite a few of us. And Godzilla on this is that force. Something else that is up with Godzilla is because of all the radiation that he's absorbing, he winds up glowing red, like in Godzilla vs. Destroyer. And so the military decides that they're not just going to they're not just going to keep using regular military forces at them, or regular explosives against Godzilla, because it hasn't been working. What winds up happening is that the Americans communicate with the Russians, and the Russians have this sort of freeze shell that it's in the experimental stage, and they start mass producing it, and they're using that to keep Godzilla cool. Therefore, when I direct this, I can keep the military thing under my or I can keep why the military keeps attacking Godzilla, and I can use this as somewhat of a plot device to keep using it, because if you watch all the Godzilla movies and how many times they actually attack the giant monsters and it does nothing to them, it sort of makes me wonder, why do they keep doing this? If it's a giant monster, they know it's not going to get affected by shells. So then why are they going to do it? So why do they keep attacking the monster? So this gives me an excuse why they keep attacking Godzilla. I've already explained what Minla looks like. Kong is not a normal gorilla. First off, if I was to direct this, one, I'd use the roar from King Kong vs. Godzilla just because I love it. But two, it would have the overall form like that one, because my idea was that this isn't a normal gorilla. Because of Kong's size, he was able to evolve into a more upright posture, so he could, because of his size, his leg muscles would need to have grown. Therefore, his back muscles and everything would have grown. So my opinion was that he'd be standing upright. He'd still have like a hunch and longer arms, but he'd be able to walk on two legs pretty powerfully. Like I don't think there'd be many shots where he's walking around like a normal gorilla. And in the book, he never walks around like a normal gorilla. He's walking around on two legs. And my idea was that Kong wasn't just like a freaky giant gorilla. Kong has an excuse, and the excuse was during the year of Chernobyl, the Russians were having an experiment on, or the Soviets were experimenting on genetics. And what winds up happening is that they want to increase, because of the increasing population, they wanted to figure something out to keep food, or to mass produce more food. And so what they do is they start experimenting with animals, and they inject them with this experimental stuff, and it makes them grow. And what winds up happening is that there's a group of gorillas, I'm not sure how many, I think there's going to be 5 or 6, 3 females and 4 males, and they inject them with that, and they start off at like 25 feet tall. And then what winds up happening, because of Chernobyl, the KGB goes in and says, if we can't have this serum, then nobody else can. And so they smash up all the labs and everything, killing probably a few scientists. And then what happens is that the gorillas accidentally get loose. And despite the search efforts for these gorillas, they get away. And my idea was that they kept growing as they were running away, and they wind up going to this island in the South Pacific, which is where they find Kong. And what happens is that a few of them reproduce, and that Kong is the last one out of those genetically modified gorillas. And that's why Kong is so big. Though Kong is shorter than Godzilla, he still is quite a bit bigger than the one in 1933, 1976, and 2005. I'm going to talk about the characters a little bit right now. By far my favorite character in the book, and probably it's going to be in the movie too, is the character John Archer. John Archer is basically a crazier version of Carl Denham from the 2005 version. In fact, I actually sort of would also go to say that he's an awful lot like Charles Foster Kane from Citizen Kane. He was a man who's gotten everything, and he doesn't take no for an answer. And something that's unique with him is that he's good with manipulating people. He's good with his words. And so he's been able to manipulate the captain of the ship, taking them to that island where Kong is, and he basically buys them out. And so he's definitely my favorite character. And what happens is, throughout the book, at the beginning he's sort of normal. I mean, you can tell that he's definitely somewhat of a snob. But as the book commences, he gets even more insane and insane and insane, until there's this one scene where Kong destroys the city because he's angry about something. And then suddenly Archer, he's like, oh my god, what have I done? And like, it just snaps in his head, and he suddenly changes. And he's more of a solid character. He's more of a more sensible person. And you wind up, throughout the entire book, you wind up sort of feeling sympathy for him because of how crazy he is. But then all of a sudden, right when he changes, you're like, oh, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen with him. And, you know, he's just my favorite character in this book. He was just so fun to work with. Oh, it was just so funny. Giving the situations that he was in, and I was like, oh, what would he do? He'd do this. Oh, he was just a blast writing. I just had so much fun with him. There's General Kenneth Costa, who is the man who winds up being the head honcho in all of this. He was the man that was sent to repair or fix up the West Coast, and then he's sent to New York to deal with this shit. He's a very realistic character. He gets worried towards the middle of the book because of the situation with Godzilla. He usually likes to kind of like sit back, but he's a thinker. He sits back and lets people talk it out. Like, he hates politics, getting involved with stuff. Lets people talk it out, but then he comes up with a situation that's usually the best for the two of them. He loves the current president. Him and the president and Costa are very good friends, very close friends, because of a war that was fought not long ago. And he's just an all-around likable character. He's very good at controlling himself. Like the scenes where he sort of gets angry and worries, and at one scene he just explodes. I wrote it so, like, in his head he's like, oh my god, I need to calm down. I very much sort of based him off of General Robert E. Lee, because Robert E. Lee was known for being calm, and, you know, towards the end of the war, because of how stressful it was, you know, he'd start flipping out, and he'd start going crazy, but then all of a sudden he'd pull himself back together, and that's what Costa is. Costa pulls himself back together quickly. There is General Higgins, and he's sort of a very dislikable character in the beginning, because he's cocky as hell. He thinks he can command, but when Godzilla lands, and he's the man responsible for going after Godzilla, or doing all the operations against Godzilla, he just can't lead at first. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's worried about this, he's worried about that. He comes off as a bit lazy. Later in the book, he questions his ability to lead. He's scared, but he won't show it. Hates another character named Colonel Monty with a passion. He just hates him. He just does not like Colonel Montgomery. Now, Colonel Montgomery is great friends with General Costa because of the war that they fought in earlier. He can lead. He's the most skilled commander out of all of them in this, probably. Next to Costa, out of the three generals that go after Godzilla, Minla, and Kong, he's probably the most skilled one. He has a sense of humor, and he likes to play around with Costa a bit.